And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Friday, March 14th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we're going to start off the show. We're going to talk about a team that I really haven't discussed here as the new league year has begun in the NFL, and that's the Dallas Cowboys. We will talk about their offseason, what they've done. They've been a little bit more busier than last year, but we'll talk about the moves that they've made, as well as talking about Demarcus Lawrence and his comments on signing with the Seahawks, and he kind of threw a little jab at the Cowboys, so I wanted to get into that as well. Also, when we go into the second part of the show, we will be talking about so a little bit of college basketball as Duke's star player Cooper Flagg, who is going to be the number one overall pick in this upcoming NBA draft, got hurt in the Georgia Tech game, in their ACC conference tournament game against Georgia Tech. So we will discuss that. We'll talk about some other NBA stuff as well. We'll talk about the meeting that Mikal Bridges and Tom Thibodeau had, and kind of talk about some of the other games that have happened. We'll talk about the Warriors once again winning last night with Jimmy Butler. They still have only lost one time, so we'll get into that. Then in the third part of the show, we will talk about Russell Wilson. So he met with the Browns yesterday. There was no deal, but he is meeting with the Giants today. So we'll talk about him, with all the Aaron Rodgers stuff, he's been aggressive, Russell Wilson, in trying to find his next team. He's not waiting. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about which team would be a better fit for him. Cleveland would be interesting if he went there, but we'll talk about that in the third part of the show. We'll talk about baseball. We'll get into some headlines. The Tokyo series is coming up. The Dodgers and the Cubs will be playing against each other, so we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about Rafael Devers and him being open to whatever role the Red Sox want to put him in. And also the Braves will be getting some of their players back at some point. Spencer Strider and Ronald Acuna. Just some general baseball segment. And then in the final part of the show, we will continue our schedule or our season overviews. And today we will be talking about the Seattle Seahawks. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about the Dallas Cowboys and the offseason that they have had so far. So like I said, busier than last year. Not a ton of major moves. They did re-sign some guys, and that's something that they did last season. They did re-sign Cavante Turpin. They also re-signed their punter, Brian Anger. But here are some of the moves that they have made. Oh, and actually also they re-signed Osa Digizua, their defensive tackle. And that's something that they did instead of franchise tagging him. So that was, it was good to get him back. But some of the other moves that they've made, they signed Solomon Thomas, who has been with the 49ers. He spent some time with the Jets. They signed him to a 2-year deal up to $8 million. And he's basically going to be the replacement for Chauncey Golston, who left in free agency to go join a division rival in the Giants. So they brought him in. He turns 30 in December. But this is a guy that they bring in, as a depth piece on the defensive line. They also did add a running back. So there's no Ezekiel Elliott this time. Did they go out and they trade for Tony Pollard? No. Did they go in and get DeMarco Murray out of retirement? No. They signed Javonte Williams to a 1-year, $3.5 million contract. And he basically comes in with Rico Dowdle leaving in free agency. They needed to address that position, and they go out and they add him. Now, are the Cowboys done addressing that position? I don't think so. I think especially when you look at this draft class of running backs, and we've said it over and over again, that's a position that they could definitely go and address. They did also sign a guard in Robert Jones, with Zach Martin retiring, you need to address that position. We'll see if maybe in the draft. They did trade for Kai Elam, and this is from the Bills. He was a first-round draft pick, and he was the guy that the Chiefs kind of picked apart in the championship game. So the Cowboys are hoping that maybe in this new system, change of scenery, he could do better. And they acquired Elam and a 2025 sixth-round pick, and in exchange for a 2025 fifth and a 2026 seventh. So, we'll see change of scenery if, he ends up playing better. But, yeah, that's what we talked about in the championship game was, after, the Bills lost some guys in that game, Christian Benford, after they lost, key guys on the defensive side of the ball, and he had to step in and take on a bigger role. The Chiefs picked him apart. And then they also acquired Kenneth Murray from the Titans, linebacker. Basically, he's going to be Eric Kendricks' replacement, with him out there as a free agent. So you look at the guys that they've brought in, there's not a ton of big names. And I know with one of the Cowboys fans that I pay attention to when it comes to content, he was more optimistic on things. But I think there's a lot of Cowboys fans that are like, what kind of offseason is this? What are we doing here? But we'll see. The Cowboys, their major acquisitions are going to come through the draft. So there are positions that they can address. Running back, I guess offensive line, defensive line maybe. We'll see. But I did want to get into what Demarcus Lawrence had to say. So Demarcus Lawrence, who's been with the Cowboys for a long time, left in free agency to join the Seahawks. And when he was being interviewed, he said, when talking about the Cowboys, he talked about wanting to win a Super Bowl, and he said, I'm not going to win a Super Bowl there, meaning the Seahawks, or meaning the Cowboys. And there was a little bit of Twitter beef between him and Micah Parsons. So this is what he said, calling out Micah Parsons. He said, calling me a clown won't change the fact that I told the truth. Maybe if you spent less time tweeting and more time winning, I wouldn't have left. And then Micah Parsons said, this is what rejection and envy looks like. This is some clown bleep. So there was a little back and forth there. And that is a bit of a problem when it comes to the Cowboys. Because when you have a player come out and say, I'm not going to win a Super Bowl here, that's a bad look. Because the Cowboys, with their brand, they should be a team that a lot of players look at and say, hey, I can win a Super Bowl here. But on the other hand, the Cowboys are not super aggressive in free agency. They're not constantly bringing in free agents. They'll trade for guys, but when it comes to signing big-name free agents, they usually don't do that. So you could also look at it from that perspective. But Micah Parsons is a guy that does have his own platform, does a podcast, and the Cowboys right now are in a spot where they've been competitive, except last year. Last year, you could throw that year out the window. But the Cowboys are not known, as of late, for going to the Super Bowl and winning championships. When they were doing that, that was before I was even alive. And they got to get back to that. So Demarcus Lawrence leaving and saying that, I agree with what he said, because the way the Cowboys have been as of late, they aren't winning Super Bowls. But I don't think him going to Seattle means you're going to win one there either. Because they're kind of in a reload period. So, some interesting comments there by Demarcus Lawrence. That he would say that. And, of course, Micah Parsons was going to respond. And that's what happens. We see this all the time. But Dallas has to get back. It was a disappointing year for them last year. We'll see what happens now. Dak Prescott comes back healthy. There's still more that needs to be done with this roster. Micah Parsons is the last guy that they need to work out a deal with and get that done. But there's still more work. You need to add another receiver to this team. We need to add a running back. Offensive line, it's going to look completely different now because now Zach Martin was the last piece of that great offensive line that they had throughout the second part of the mid 2010s into the 2020s. That's a tough replacement. The defense, there's always, they could always add to that as well. But there's still things that they need to address. Right now, to me, they're the third best team in the division. Just like last year. That's what they are. And they better hope the Giants don't find their quarterback. Because you would imagine that happens. They find the right quarterback, like the Commanders did with Jaden Daniels, then they're going to be a problem too. Now, you might be saying, that's a bit of a stretch, Kenneth. All right, slow down there. But for now, they are the third best team in the division. And I can't believe I'm saying that because last year I was like, yeah, it's Dallas and Philly at the top. Not so much anymore. It's Philly and it's Washington. And then it's Dallas. But let me know what you guys think about the Cowboys offseason. Again, not a ton of big names. They made moves, but nothing to me that moves the needle, in my opinion. And also let me know what you guys think about what Demarcus Lawrence said, throwing a little jab at the Cowboys. So we are going to take our first break, and then when we come back, we'll talk some basketball. We'll do a college basketball segment. We're going to talk about Cooper Flagg getting hurt, his injury, the impact of that, as well as talking about some other stuff. We'll talk about the meeting between Mikal Bridges and Tom Thibodeau and some of the other NBA action. Also, we'll talk about what's going on in college basketball as well, as it is conference tournament week. So we'll get into all that when we come back from our next break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we're going to talk some basketball now. We'll talk about the Cooper Flagg injury, Mikal Bridges and Tom Thibodeau, their meeting, and all the other action in basketball, both in college and in the NBA. So, how about that? Me talking about college basketball. It's the first time, really, but it's a major story because Cooper Flagg is looked at as the upcoming number one overall pick in this upcoming NBA draft. And, Duke is one of the best teams in college basketball. This is one of the best Duke teams in a couple of years now. I mean, Duke has obviously, been a staple in the tournament, but, they haven't really gone on a deep tournament run in a while. And, yeah, right now, when you look at the rankings, actually, at least looking at the AP rankings, they're number one. You got them at 1, then you got Houston, who's always good. Auburn is at number 3, Florida, and then Alabama. Right now, that's the top 5. And then you got St. John's at 6, and that's my neck of the woods, St. John's. Now, I didn't go to St. John's, but it'd be cool to see St. John's go on a run. But yeah, right now Duke is at number 1, and looking at the ACC conference tournament at the moment, so Duke did end up winning their game yesterday. That was the important thing. They were losing when Cooper Flagg got taken out. They were losing, I think it was 26-17. So he went up for a rebound, and he landed awkwardly, and you feared the worst. You feared the worst, right? And he was in a wheelchair, but thankfully he came out for the second half to sit on the bench. It doesn't appear like it's significant. There was no fracture, which is good. But it looks like he's probably going to be out for the rest of the ACC conference tournament. And I think that's the right approach. You don't want to rush him back. Now, Duke is not a team that's on the fringe, right? They're not in jeopardy of missing the tournament. If that was the case, then maybe you have a different conversation. And, listening to John Shire after the game, the coach, he didn't seem like he was optimistic of Cooper Flagg playing for the rest of the ACC tournament. And guys did step up. Like I said, when he got taken out, they were losing 29-17 at one point. But they came back. You got key contributions from guys that stepped up, and they were able to get the win 78-70. And that sets up a couple of matchups today. You got Duke against UNC tonight. Now, you want to talk about a team that, could be on the outside looking in, and that's UNC. This is a very important game for UNC. Take advantage of Duke missing Cooper Flagg. And also, the history between those two teams. I mean, come on. And then you also have Clemson and Louisville. Louisville has really bounced back. I remember a couple of years ago, they were really bad, record-wise. But they've turned it around. But yeah, those are the two matchups we got tonight. So we'll see what happens there. But, this was probably the best-case scenario for Duke when it comes to Cooper Flagg. Now, what's the timetable? Is he going to be back by the time we get to March Madness? Or the March Madness tournament? Or, are they going to miss him, in the first round game? Because if this leaks into March Madness, that's going to be a problem. But if he's just out for, the rest of the ACC tournament, you could live with that. March Madness tournament's the grand prize. And if they don't have him for that, well, then Duke's not winning anything this year. Their championship chances are out the window. But if they can get him back, then they'll be in a good spot to try to go on a run. But guys are just going to have to step up. And that's what happened yesterday. So, but still, it's a major injury. You don't want to see that happening. Hopefully he comes back and he's able to play when we get to the dance. But I also wanted to talk about Mikal Bridges and the Tom Thibodeau stuff. So it was interesting. It was reported that Bridges met with Thibodeau, and then Tom Thibodeau comes out and says that there was no meeting. Now, the meeting was over reducing minutes for the starters, having the guys on the bench play more minutes. And listen, I do agree with that. I do think at times you do want to manage your players' minutes a little bit. You want to keep these guys fresh. And Tom Thibodeau's a guy that he pushes his starters. He plays them for a lot of minutes. Guys are playing 40-plus minutes. But I know there's been this debate for the last couple of years on, well, if he keeps doing that, guys are going to get hurt. And I think when guys have gotten hurt, especially in the playoffs last year with the Knicks, guys were getting hurt because some of them tend to get hurt, just in general. Like OG Anunoby is a guy that got hurt. Got hurt this year. And you look at Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson got hurt because he landed awkwardly on Austin Reeves' foot. Guys are not getting hurt because they're playing too long. But I do think you don't want guys being fatigued. That's really what it comes down to. You don't want guys being fatigued because then these deeper teams like Boston, like Cleveland, they will take advantage of that. And they're just going to wipe the floor with the Knicks. You want to make sure that the Knicks starting five going into the postseason is fresh. Get these guys off their feet a little bit. Now, some guys are not going to want to get taken out. Like Josh Hart's going to play. Josh Hart would play the whole game. We know that. But it's just management. Doesn't that mean, you cut their minutes in half? I think it's just a little bit of tinkering. But I thought it was interesting that Thibodeau said that the meeting didn't happen. But it was funny. When that report came out, and then Mikal Bridges went out and had a really good game, and he hit that buzzer beater shot against Portland, and there was some debate on it on whether he traveled or not. And when you do watch it, yeah, it kind of does look like he traveled. Took like 3 steps, and then he took the shot. But, hey, if you're a Knicks fan, you don't care. That was a big shot. And Mikal Bridges, he doesn't miss games. He does not miss games. He's played every single game. So it is interesting, this kind of debate that's been had. But look, I think we're going to still see the Knicks playing, big minutes. They're starters. But, yeah, I mean, you don't want these guys being tired for the playoffs. You just don't want that. So, we'll see if anything else develops from this. But I just thought it was interesting. I know I brought it up briefly yesterday, but I just wanted to dive into it a little bit more. So we'll see what comes about it. But to talk about some of the other NBA action, so Steph Curry actually got to I think it was 4,000 3-pointers last night. As the Warriors just continue to win, they don't lose with Jimmy Butler. They still only have 1 loss with Jimmy Butler. They're now 38-28. Yeah, so Steph Curry reaches 4,000 career 3-pointers. And now the Warriors, they have won, I think they've won 6 in a row now. Yeah, so they're 9-1 in their last 10 games. They've won 6 in a row. Curry last night, he actually only finished with 11 points. Draymond actually was their leading scorer. Can you believe that? 23 points last night for him, 8 for 14 from the field, 4 for 7 from 3. Jimmy Butler only 6 points. But the Warriors just keep winning. They're now 10 games over 500. And you look at the Western Conference standings right now, and they are currently the 6th seed. They're 3 games back of the Lakers and the Rockets, and then they're 4 games back of the Grizzlies and the Nuggets. So if there's still a little bit of time left where, if these teams slip up, Warriors could pass them in the standings. It could definitely happen. But they also have the Timberwolves right behind them, who are a half game behind them. They're the 7th seed right now currently. And like I said, conference tournaments are still going on. There's a ton of games going on. I don't even know where to even start. But yeah, Duke won yesterday. Oregon, who's 24-8, they knocked off Indiana. St. John's got the win against Butler. They're looking to win the Big East this season. The Big East tournament. But yeah, looking at some of the games for today, you got Oregon and Michigan State, Big Ten matchup. Number 1 seed Michigan State against the number 8 Oregon Ducks. That's at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Auburn and Ole Miss, that's on at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. That's SEC. Then you got Texas and Tennessee, another SEC game. Texas is one of those teams that's on the outside looking in. They'd have to win the tournament to get in, most likely. Marquette and St. John's, that's a big matchup. I mean, they just played each other last weekend, and, Marquette lost in overtime to St. John's. St. John's hit a buzzer beater against them, so that should be a good game. Duke and UNC is tonight. You got number 4 BYU against Houston. That's a Big 12 tournament. Maryland and the Fighting Illini. You got Florida and Missouri. They're playing each other. Michigan and Purdue. That's on late. UConn and Creighton. There are actually a lot of good games on tonight. Alabama and Kentucky. But the one game that I'm really focused on, all right, you guys ready for this, is the MAC, the Double A. And that is the Quinnipiac Bobcats taking on Iona. Now, that is the school that I went to. They'll be playing tonight on TV. That's at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. The men's team has never made it to the tournament. Never. Now, they've actually been decent the last couple of years, but they have never made it to the dance. And I would like to see them make it. Now, does that mean they would go on a title run? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They would get bounced out in the first round immediately. But just to see them in the tournament, I'm all for it. Now, they did win the Frozen Four a couple years ago in hockey, and that's what they're known for. But I want to see them get to the tournament in basketball. And also the women's team as well. The women's team for Quinnipiac is also good this year too. So it's possible I could see two of those teams, or both of those teams, make it to the tournament. Would they win them? No, but just to see them in it, like I said. So, yeah, a lot of good games tonight in college basketball. So we'll pay attention to that. And then when it comes to the NBA action tonight, take a quick look at that. So you got the Cavs playing the Grizzlies tonight. That's a good game. Trying to see what else. Lakers and Nuggets. I mean, there's no LeBron. They did lose to the Bucks last night without LeBron. Luka had a big game, but they ended up losing. So, yeah, a couple of big games there. Mavericks are taking on the Rockets. So, yeah, that's a lot of basketball tonight. So, make sure to pay attention to that. Let me know what you guys think, though, about what we just discussed in the comments. Before we go to break, though, just want to remind you guys, once again, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So when we come back from our next break, we'll talk about Russell Wilson meeting with the Browns, meeting with the Giants. Who should he go to? Who should he sign with? So we'll get into that when we come back from our next break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some loose shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we are going to talk about Russell Wilson and his meetings. Now, he did already meet with the Browns. There was no deal. And now he is going to meet with the Giants today. Now, just because he didn't, come away with an agreement with the Browns, with his meeting, doesn't mean that they can't revisit and, come to terms. So, yeah, with all the Aaron Rodgers stuff going on and the pictures of him, walking on the beach, and, people are making just such a big deal about that. It's whatever, but everybody has their opinion. I get it. So with all of that going on one side, you got Russell Wilson who's saying, you know what, I'm not waiting for this guy to sign with someone. I am going to, be aggressive and see what's out there for me so I can find my next team. And as he should. You don't need to wait for anybody. So he visited with the Browns. He's visiting with the Giants now. Last year, he visited with the Giants, and then he signed with the Steelers. But yeah, I don't think the Steelers, I don't think it's going to happen with the Steelers and Russ. I think the Steelers, they have, they kind of, screwed themselves a little bit because you benched Justin Fields for Russell Wilson last season. And then the offseason comes around. Now you're trying to sign Fields over Russ, and it seems like you kind of closed the door on Russ. And then Justin Fields is saying to himself, well, you guys benched me. I'm going to go to a team where I know I'm definitely going to be the starter. They're going to commit to me. He goes to the Jets, and now Russ is saying, well, you guys prioritize signing Fields over me. Now I'm going to go to a different team. So now if Rodgers decides, hey, I'm not going to the Steelers either, what are the Steelers going to do at quarterback? Jameis Winston? Honestly, if I'm a Steelers fan, if I'm a Giant fan, if I don't get Russell Wilson and I don't get Aaron Rodgers, Jameis Winston should be my number 3 choice. And you could make the argument he should be the number 2 choice over Russ, because I honestly would take Jameis over Russ if I'm a Giant fan. If I have a young quarterback waiting, and maybe it's not the best decision to have, Jameis be the mentor because of the interceptions, but Jameis has the ability to go out there and throw for 400 yards in a game, 4 touchdowns, but the problem is he's going to throw 4 interceptions. And we saw that against the Broncos last year in that high-scoring game where I think he had 500 yards passing, but he had 2 pick sixes in the game. And you might be saying, well, what about Aaron Rodgers? Look, I do think... Now, I don't think Russ is, completely cooked. I think Russ can still play a little bit. The problem is he's a one-trick pony, right? He's not the same Russ that he was in Seattle. He just throws those moon balls. And then you saw what happened towards the end of the season. The Steelers lost 5 straight games. With the Jets, I think if we're in the right situation, I think Aaron Rodgers can show you that he could still play at, an above-average level. In the right situation. But if he goes to the Giants, it might not work out. But back to Russ, though. I think Russ would be a good bridge. Now, like I said, I would take Jameis just for the chance to see a quarterback throw for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns and whatever, but just to make things fun, make things interesting. But I do think Russ would be okay for just 1 year. Now, where should he go? Should he go to Cleveland or should he go to the Giants? If those are his 2 options. What's the better option? Well, both teams finished in last place in their respective divisions last season. If Russ stays within the AFC North, he does have to compete with Kenny Pickett. I mean, we do have to bring that in. Old Steelers quarterback, just won the Super Bowl with the Eagles, took some snaps in that Super Bowl. You will have to compete with Kenny Pickett. Now, I think Russ is better than Kenny Pickett, even though it's not saying much. Kenny Pickett did look decent in the game against Dallas. in the regular season. The Eagles are running the tush push with him, but you know what? Anybody could look good with the Eagles. And you saw what Tanner McKee did after Kenny Pickett got hurt. But Russ is going to have to compete with Kenny Pickett, and I would imagine that Russ would beat Kenny Pickett out for the job. And then with the Giants, Russ would definitely be the starter. There's no competition. Tommy DeVito and Russ are not competing to be starters. Russell Wilson will be the starter. So you got to look at it that. But if you look at the rosters, I mean, I guess, you'd probably give the edge to the Browns, right? Because, they got Myles Garrett, and they're a team that they won 11 games a couple of years ago. They just didn't get good quarterback play last year. So you figure if, Russ could play decent, the Browns could definitely win more than 3 games. Deshaun Watson was horrible before he got hurt. And then Jameis, he beat the Ravens, which I was in attendance for. But other than that, they did not do that much winning. I think Russ could definitely win more games for the Browns. And Jerry Jeudy's there. There's some familiarity there. I don't know what they're going to do at running back. Nick Chubb is a free agent. He's not coming back, it looks like. They got a good tight end in David Njoku. And Russ threw, some touchdowns at Pat Freiermuth. They did a nice rapport. So I feel like you'd probably give the edge to the Browns. But look, I know we spend a lot of time trashing the Giants, but the Giants have a good defense on paper. And the moves that they've made this offseason to strengthen the secondary, and then, you added Chauncey Goldston to that defensive line with Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. You got a couple of nice linebackers. The defense is not bad. It's the offense that really needs some work. And Russell Wilson will be thrown to Malik Neighbors. And they re-signed Darius Slayton. So, yeah, he'd be throwing moonballs to Darius Slayton. And the Giants have a decent running game with Tyrone Tracy. Tyrone Tracy showed some promise last year. So, the Giants probably got to add to that running back room. But I think that's an encouraging sign with Tracy, 5th-round pick. And again, the offensive line, both offensive lines have dealt with injuries over the last couple of years. And before the Giants' before Andrew Thomas got hurt, the offensive line was decent. And you'll be paired up with Brian Dable, an offensive-minded head coach. And that'd be an interesting relationship. Even if the Giants bring in Rodgers, both relationships will be interesting. Rodgers with Brian Dable or Russ with Brian Dable. Will we see Brian Dable yelling at Russ on the sidelines like Sean Payton was? Are we going to see that? So, yeah, but the other thing, too, is, like I said, both teams finished in last place. They play in loaded divisions. You're either going to play in the same division you played in last year with Lamar Jackson, you'd be playing against the Steelers, you'd be playing against Joe Burrow, or you're playing against the Super Bowl champions, the team that was the runner-up to the Eagles in the NFC, and the Dallas Cowboys, who own the Giants. So it's pick your poison, basically. So I guess, if I'm Russ, which is the better roster? Maybe you lean towards the Browns. But you could also say you have to play in New York. Could be a good opportunity. Choosing Cleveland over New York, imagine that. But that's kind of where we're at right now. Maybe there's another team out there that Russ could visit. The Tennessee Titans. But they could be looking to take Cam Ward. So, yeah, I don't really know. Both of these teams are not good. But, like I said, the Browns, they won 11 games a couple years ago. A lot of the guys that they had on that team are still on this team. And Myles Garrett is back. So, in terms of the team, maybe you go with the Browns. But maybe Russ is trying to play in New York. And it makes sense, because last year he visited the Giants, and Daniel Jones was going to be the starter. And when he saw Pittsburgh was knocking, he went there. So I think Russell Wilson is ultimately going to end up with the Giants. I had him going to Vegas with Pete Carroll, but they went and traded for Geno, and that threw that out the window. So now I think we could see him going to the Giants. I think that's going to happen. That's my opinion. And then, again, we're still waiting on Aaron Rodgers. Joe Flacco's out there. Maybe the Browns bring back Joe Flacco. You know what? That's what they should do. Bring back Joe Flacco because you had success with him. It was a mistake to let him walk. Now, Flacco was good in the 5-6 games that he played in, but, over the course of a whole season, yeah, I don't know about that. And apparently if the Giants miss out on Russ and Aaron Rodgers, Flacco's their next option. I don't see it. Now, Flacco is a mentor to a young quarterback. Yeah, I'll take it. But, Joe Flacco starting for my team in, 2025. Yeah, I don't know. But let me know what you guys think, though, about the Russell Wilson stuff. Where do you think you should go? Should you sign with the Browns or should you sign with the Giants if it comes down to those two options? Because it seems like Pittsburgh, it's not going to happen. Because what I think is going to happen is Rodgers is either going to go to the Steelers, and then you hear the Vikings could make an offer to him. Vikings would be the best spot for him because they have the best roster. You got the Vikings, the Steelers, and then the Giants. And I think Russ is going to end up on the Giants. That's what I think. But let me know what you guys think about all that. So we're going to take our next break, and then when we come back, we'll talk some MLB stuff. We'll talk about the Dodgers and the Cubs playing in the Tokyo series. Rafael Devers, we'll talk about him, and some stuff regarding the Braves and their star players coming back, some of their star players coming back from injury. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the fourth part of the show, we're just going to go over some headlines around Major League Baseball. So we do have the Tokyo series coming up. We'll talk about Rafael Devers, kind of walking back his comments from earlier this spring training. I almost said this offseason. But when spring training opened up, when players reported, and then we'll talk about the Braves as well as, they're looking to get back Spencer Strider and Ronald Acuna at some point this season. But we are getting the Tokyo series, and the Dodgers and the Cubs will be playing exhibition games against, the Japanese teams there. But we will be getting the Cubs and the Dodgers playing against each other, and that'll be, official games for the season. And to start us off, so it starts Tuesday. It's a 2-game series. And you have Yoshinobu Yamamoto against Shota Imanaga, who was solid for the Cubs last year in his rookie season. He was 15-3 last year with a 2.91 ERA. He was solid. And he's hoping to build off of that. And then, of course, you had Yamamoto last year, who got hurt, only pitched in 18 games in the regular season. He was 7-2 with a 3 ERA. He did get off to a rough start because you remember the international series last year. I think it was, who was it against? Was it against the Padres? I think it was against the Padres, but he was rough in his first career start. But obviously settled in and, of course, pitched well in the postseason, and he's a World Series champ. So that's the first game. But then, Wednesday, you got Roki Sasaki against Justin Steele. So 2 good pitching matchups, and we'll get to see Sasaki up close, how he looks. Now, depending on where you are, if you're on the East Coast, this game starts at 6:10 in the morning. And then if you're on the West Coast, this game will start at 3 in the morning. So, look, I'll be honest. I'm not getting up early to watch the game. Actually, I shouldn't. You know what? I shouldn't say that. Because I think, last year I did wake up early. Or actually, no, I think I happened to be up. And I turned on the game when Yamamoto was pitching. And I was like, wow, he's a rough start for him. But obviously, he turned things around. So, it's exciting. We're going to get some real baseball action before the season starts in 2 weeks. Now, less than 2 weeks. Game start on March 27th. It's coming up. 13 days. And I cannot wait. Even though as a Yankee fan, I am very nervous about this season with all the injuries that have happened. All the injury stuff over the last, several weeks. And especially with the kind of the knockout punch with Garrett Cole being out. But actually, so Garrett Cole did undergo Tommy John surgery, and he might be back sooner than expected with what they did with the procedure. They put in, I think, an internal brace. So that kind of speeds up the timetable a little bit. So that's good news on that front. And then also, the Yankees also got a positive update on Giancarlo Stanton. He could be back by Memorial Day with the elbow stuff, but he's also dealing with a chronic calf issue, which makes sense because he really does not run that hard, and but I know that has something to do with it. Some positive news amongst all the craziness if you're a Yankee fan, but I'm sorry if you guys are sick of the Yankee talk, but I just wanted to throw that in there because that did happen. And that is a headline. But I wanted to talk about some of the other stuff. So Rafael Devers, if you remember, they signed Alex Bregman, and Devers was asked about, if he was the DH, you have Bregman play third base, whatever. And Devers said, I'm a third baseman. That's what he said. And, obviously this was made into a big deal. Oh, how could he say this? The Red Sox got to deal with this. And Alex Cora did talk to him. And now since then, Devers has, walked it back. And he's expressed openness to being the DH. And look, that doesn't mean that, he's not going to play third base at all this year. But the DH spot is there now to be a flexible spot. You could put anybody there. Now, for the Yankees, that's not the case. But, sorry, I had to bring that up. But that's not the case when it comes to them. But with the Red Sox, you could have Devers DH. Bregman can play third. Now, there's, talk that Bregman could play second base. You could put Devers at third. Devers could also play first base if he has to. But you can move him around a little bit. And, DH, if you want to give him a half day off, you could put him at the DH spot. But yeah, I figured that when Devers said I'm a third baseman, I'm like, it's not going to last that long. The Red Sox are going to say, look, we brought Bregman in. We want to do a different thing. We want to put him at third at times. You'll play third. I'm guessing I don't know exactly what was said, but I'm assuming he'll play third at some points during the year. But he's going to DH, and they'll figure it out. So, I knew that was probably going to happen. You kind of figured that was going to happen. Alex Cora talked to him, and I think Alex Cora is more than capable of handling things like this. Now, Devers hasn't played yet. There's some concerns with his shoulder. But Devers said he's feeling good. He's feeling healthy for the season. Because he hasn't played in a game yet. And there was talk about, his timing. He's working on his timing, his His swing is not all the way back. So that's, I guess, why he hasn't played. But the Red Sox, they're going to be a problem this year. I think they're going to be a good team. And now with all the, the Yankee stuff, with all the injuries, the Red Sox, they have a chance to win this division. They do. Right now, I think the top 3 teams, it's the Red Sox, the Yankees, and the Orioles. Not in any particular order, but those are the 3 teams that I see winning the division. I don't know what's going to happen with the Blue Jays. The Rays, they pitch well, but, their lineup is, I think, the bigger concern. Because the Rays are getting Shane McClanahan back. So that's big, getting him back in the rotation. But, the American League East, once again, could be the best division in baseball. Because you could definitely, there's a scenario where you could see all those teams finishing around 500. But we'll see. But the last thing I did want to talk about was the Braves. So Spencer Strider could likely be back in late April. He's set to begin a minor league rehab assignment at the start of the season. So getting him back late April would be big, a big boost for the rotation, because obviously, you lost Max Fried, but getting him back would be huge for that rotation. And then for Acuna, you're looking at early to mid-May, him coming back from the torn ACL. And a healthy Braves team is going to be a problem. If everybody can stay healthy, if, Austin Riley and Matt Olson can bounce back from last year, because also some guys had down years last year. If this team is 100% or close to it, they will be a problem. And I would have them winning the National League East if they're healthy. And they were a wild card team last year. They still made it. They ended up getting knocked out by the Padres. But, if you get Acuna back, he's one of the best players in baseball. This is going to be a different looking team. And they're a threat to the Dodgers. National League is good. We talked about it. National League is better than the American League. There's there's better teams in the National League. A lot of these teams you could look at and say, this team can go to the World Series. Now, the problem is the Dodgers are in the National League, and you'll say, well, the Dodgers are going to the World Series. But, when you look at the Braves, I even think the Padres gave the Dodgers a tough time. You look at the Mets. They were in the championship series last year. You had Juan Soto. The Phillies have been there before in recent years. Diamondbacks have been there in recent years. They're good teams in the National League. And the Braves, they won it in 2021, but they want to get back there. And you thought when they had that year a couple years ago, Matt Olson had a big year, and Acuna, of course, won MVP. You thought that they were going to go on a run, and they ended up losing to the Phillies. So, we'll see what happens. But, Braves will be getting reinforcements. Baseball's coming up. And we'll talk about the Tokyo series. Obviously, I will, have to record the game or something. I'm going to have to do something because I'll be honest with you, I'm not getting up that early to watch the game. I'll probably just DVR it. But that is next week, and then baseball, and then everybody else starts off the year the following week. So let me know what you guys think about some of the things we talked about. Let me know in the comments. We will be taking our final break of the show now, and then when we come back, we will do a season overview on the Seahawks, and that'll take us right to the end of the show. So for one final time today, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast, and for the final part of the show, we are now going to do a season overview on the Seattle Seahawks, and we still have the Rams, so we'll cover the Rams on Monday. But the Seattle Seahawks, in 2024, they finished with a winning record, and they kind of had a roller coaster of a season. They finished at 10-7, so they finished with the same record as the Rams, but the Rams had the tiebreaker over them. Because it actually came down to strength of schedule, because they both went 4-2 in the division. They went 6-6 in the conference, and they both went 4-1 against the AFC. I don't think that really matters. That doesn't matter, but still, they had the same records there. However, the Seahawks actually were 7-1 on the road in 2024, so that actually is impressive. But yeah, going into the year, the Seahawks, new head coach, I kind of I gave them less wins. I gave them around, I think, 6 or 7 wins, and they started off the year strong. They started off the year 3-0 on the season. They beat the Broncos, and that was Bo Nix's first start. But then they beat the Patriots, and they beat the Dolphins at home without Tua. They won 24-3. But still, 3-0, and then they ended up losing 3 straight. They lost to the Lions. Then they lost to the Giants at home. I keep saying it. I don't know how that happened. How did that happen? Darius Slayton had, I think, 1 touchdown in the game. Daniel Jones was slinging it, 257 yards, 2 touchdowns. Tyrone Tracy had a big game, 129 yards. Giants blocked a field goal attempt and ran it back for a touchdown, which was huge in that game. I really don't know how the Giants, that is how the Giants won, but still, it just doesn't make sense. And that kind of gave the Giants some optimism on the season, and then they proceeded to lose every single game after that, basically, until the Colts game. So, yeah, they did lose at home against the Giants, but then they lost at home against the 49ers, which the 49ers own them, so, but until later in the season. And then they bounced back after the 3-game losing streak. Geno Smith had 2 touchdowns in the game against the Falcons. They won 34-14. Then they lost a couple of home games. Josh Allen and the Bills came in and won 31-10. Then they lose that overtime game against the Rams. Geno Smith had a pick 6 in that game. So they went into the bye week at 4-5. But then they proceeded to win their next 4 games. They won at 49ers. Geno Smith, with little time left, scrambled for a touchdown. This was a 13-yard touchdown. And then the Seahawks got their revenge against the 49ers. Then they won a couple of games against the Cardinals. In between that, they beat the Jets. Leonard Williams had that pick 6 off of Aaron Rodgers. Geno Smith, in his return to MetLife, they win. That was an ugly game. And they were losing, they were losing 21-7. And the Jets were going down the field to score again, and then Rodgers threw a pick. So that was a momentum shifter. That was a very ugly game. But they won that. Then they lost a couple games to NFC North opponents. They lost to the Packers 30-13 at home. And Geno Smith actually left that game. And we saw a little bit of Sam Howell, and he was not great. And then they lost to the Vikings. And Sam Darnold threw 3 touchdowns against them, and now he's going to be their quarterback. And we'll get into that in a little bit. And then they won that ugly Thursday night game against the Bears 6-3. And then they did beat the Rams in the final game of the regular season, but the Rams had already clinched the division, and they finished 10-7. And Geno Smith on the year, over 4,000 yards passing, 21 touchdowns, 15 picks though is a lot. Running the football, Zach Charbonnet had 569 yards rushing. Kenneth Walker had 573 yards rushing. Charbonnet had 8 touchdowns. Walker had 7. Geno Smith had a couple of rushing touchdowns. Jackson Smith and Jigba, who is going to be that number 1 wide receiver this season, he was basically the number 1 last year. 100 receptions, 1,130 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns. DK Metcalf, 992 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns, no longer on the team. Tyler Lockett, 600 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns, no longer on the team. So it'll be interesting to see what the Seahawks do to revamp that receiving core. to go along with Smith and Jigba. But, looking at the defensive side of the ball, Leonard Williams led the team with 11 sacks. Derek Hall had 8. They did re-sign Ernest Jones, one of their players, and they also just brought in Demarcus Lawrence. So, the defensive line could be a problem for some teams. And then looking at who led the team in interceptions, there was 3, actually. Kobe Bryant had 3, Julian Love had 3, and Tariq Woolen had 3 as well. And then, like I said, Leonard Williams had a pick 6 on the year of Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, the Seahawks, look, they finished with the winning record. Mike McDonald as the head coach, not bad. First rookie season, you just missed out. Or your first rookie season, your first year as a head coach, not bad. But they're hoping for better things in 2025. Now with Sam Darnold at quarterback. And in terms of their offense, they were kind of middle of the pack. Total yards per game, they were 14th. They were 8th in passing yards per game. 28th in rushing yards per game. And it's interesting because, with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, you'd expect those numbers to be higher. But, they both, I believe they both missed time due to injury. But yeah, they have a nice duo there with those 2 running backs. Points per game, they were 18th. Time of possession per game, they were 27th. It's going to be interesting now with Sam Darnold. How is that going to change? Personally, for me, I think the Seahawks upgraded at quarterback, and I think in more ways than one. I think because, Geno Smith is obviously getting up there in age, so maybe they wanted to go younger. Now, another YouTuber that I do watch did bring up that, Geno spent a lot of time on the bench, and, now with Seattle, he's kind of had that second chance, and, that kind of makes the age thing irrelevant. So I kind of understand that, but still, you still want to go with the younger quarterback. Geno's not going to play into his 40s, right? Maybe. So I do, and Sam Darnold is coming off a better year, and I feel like Geno has kind of declined these last couple of years. The first year with Seattle, he was solid, but then the last couple of years, I feel like he's kind of taken a step back. And Sam Darnold is coming off of a career year. Maybe it was a fluke. We'll find out. But I don't know. I think based off of the years they're coming off of, and the age, I think Sam Darnold was an upgrade. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say it was a significant upgrade, but I do think on some level it was an upgrade. And then looking at the defensive side of the ball, points allowed per game, they were 11th in the NFL, 14th in the NFL when it comes to total yards allowed per game, passing yards allowed per game. Seahawks defense was 11th, and then they were 16th against the run. Top 10 in sacks, though. And now you're adding Demarcus Lawrence, who can get after the quarterback. And then they were 12th in interceptions. So defense, middle of the pack, top 10 in sacks. Like I said, you added Demarcus Lawrence. You re-signed one of your guys as well. They did bring in, actually, Valdez-Scantling on the offense, and that's because they have Clint Kubiak now as the offensive coordinator. And he was with the Saints, and that's where Valdez-Scantling was. Valdez-Scantling was making a lot of plays for the Saints. So, a guy that, Sam Darnold could throw the deep ball to. But they do need to add more to Valdez. Going into the year with Valdez-Scantling as your number 2, they need to add to that. They do need to add to that. But the offensive line also was not very good for the Seahawks. That's another area that they are going to have to address. They did bring in a tackle in Josh Jones, but again, offensive line, receiver, that needs to be figured out there. Look, the Seahawks on paper, they're not a bad team. They need to add more to this roster. It's going to be different now without DK Metcalf next season. Tyler Lockett as well. Those were guys that had been on the team for a while. More so Lockett. Lockett's been on the team since 2015 when he was a rookie. But in the NFC West, right now, I think they're better than the Cardinals. They've owned the Cardinals for a while now. The 49ers are kind of going through some changes, but, I figure they're going to bounce back. And then you got the Rams. The Rams are giving the Seahawks problems. Right now, I probably, going into next year, I think the 49ers are going to be better. I look at the Seahawks as the third best team. right now in the division. And we'll see how it goes. But look, 10-7 with the rookie head coach, and they still missed the playoffs. You would think at 10-7 you make it, but that's just how you had 3 NFC North teams make the playoffs last year, and they won 11 plus games. So, we'll see. What else they decide to do, what other moves they can make. I mean, listen, Cooper Kupp is out there. Maybe they bring him in. Maybe they're one of the other receivers they bring in. Cooper Kupp is going to make a decision very soon, so I think that's something we will talk about on Monday. Hopefully, if he does get signed. And then, of course, all the other stuff as well, the other quarterback stuff. But, yeah, we will see what happens. But let me know what you guys think about the Seahawks, their season. What else do you think they could do this offseason? And did you like that they did move off of Geno Smith and bring in Sam Darnold? Let me know in the comments. But that is pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well. Make sure to leave a like and comment on the videos and subscribe to both YouTube channels. We greatly appreciate it. And until next time, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired.